familiar with the concept or not, a lot of us have had experienced some embodiment of the eerie. Maybe it's when you're walking to your home late at night and you hear this sound, but it's unplaceable, and you just get this sense of discomfort because you don't know where it's coming from and you don't know what it is. That's kind of the embodiment of the eerie that I'm going to explore today in the eerie romance of La Jetee. Hello, my name is Malia Campagna, and we're going to try to find some intersections and connections with the concept of the eerie and the romanticism within La Jetee. Okay, so just as some background, La Jetee is a film, and it is the seeming romance of what Chris Barker, the director, calls it, which is translated to a photo novel. So it is a series of still photographs, except one, there's a singular moving scene in the entire short film, 27 minutes. But besides that, it's all still images that are combined together. Okay, so just to give you guys a little bit of a background on the plot, because there is a lot to cover. This is the man he's our unnamed protagonist, and his memory is marked by an image of his childhood. We're not exactly sure, we don't see the image itself, but we do know some fragments of what occurs during this conceptual memory that frames the rest of his life. So it occurs at the Orly Airport in Paris, France, on this observation deck that he is attending as a child. And he sees this woman, okay, well, it's actually this woman, but the shadow over in the very corner. She's there present at this scene, but he also witnesses something horrific happening, and it ends up being a death of a man. And he doesn't know, he hasn't really pieced together who this man is, and it's just the relation with the woman in the image, but it kind of presents us with this like contradiction of a horrific scene occurring with this beauty, and he becomes obsessed with the image of the woman and the woman herself. Alright, so a few years after this framework image haunts his memory, World War III occurs and the land itself becomes uninhabitable. So Paris is completely decimated along with the rest of the world. So these scientists, the victors, and their prisoners have to inhabit tunnels beneath the Jetee, which is a quarter region of Paris. So they're completely underground because the ground is riddled with radioactivity. And these scientists are trying to perform experiments of time travel on the prisoners because they want to use past and present materials to save, not past and present, past and future materials to save the present, so they can restore humanity. But the problem is that with all their prisoners, they have become, the mental images have just become too strong, and they have just ended up going insane because of it, because they can't handle the shock of going into another time period. But what makes our protagonist different is this mental image that haunts him as a child. So because this strong mental image of the woman in the scene that occurs, he is able to go back in time and into the future. So the scientists first sent him into the past, and he ends up uniting with the woman in the image, and they have this beautiful relationship together where a lot of the time they're just spending time together at the park and not doing anything super interesting. I guess it's like a little mundane, but it's so beautiful because they just appreciate each other's presence so much. And he spends quite a bit of time with her together, on and off, when he comes back into the present under the tunnels. So eventually the scientists decide that he is ready to go into the future. They've done their tests with the past, and yeah, he can do it now. And he does go into the future, and he discovers that Paris has been rebuilt and fully recovered, and fully restored. All of humanity, they were able to come back. So while he's in the future, in Paris. These alien people from the future, like he interacts with them, and they basically give him this battery thing that is able to restore all of humanity at the present time. So he takes it and he's able to use it, and he saves the present. They actually don't like him at first because he's from the past and he's not of the time, but they end up getting acquainted with him, and then they are ready to accept him as their own. But he doesn't want to go into the future because he is so enamored with this woman and he wants to be reunited with her. So he asks instead to return to the scene of his childhood at Orly Airport to reunite with his lover. But he dies. The image that marked his memory as a child was his death. So it becomes this full circle moment of something that he wasn't able to fully process when he was a child. I mean, it's unfathomable as well. He can't really escape the bounds of time. He had this timelessness while he was time traveling, but it caught up to him, and that is the image that marked his childhood. And you see the woman in the back and the man dying, which is himself. Okay, so now that the plot has been explained, I do want to just give some background on the main scene that I'll be focusing on, which is the museum scene. So this is the last scene where the protagonist and his lover are together, and it is the longest scene of the entire film. And they are just inhabiting a history of natural museum, and it's just a bunch of taxidermied animals. But the thing that makes it kind of stand out is that they're the only two people in the museum. So the museum is completely empty, and that becomes kind of an important framework of how we'll be using the Eerie within that, which I'll go into later. But it's also the only time that they're pictured in a public setting with no other people around. So when he was in the past, when they were walking through the park, there were quite a few other people around. So I know it's just a stark contrast. And it's so beautiful. I mean, just like the image itself. Even though you guys don't know anything about it, just the light and the birds and them two together, it really marks the film. Okay, so now that we kind of have that scene in mind, I want to introduce the theoretical framework of how I'll be analyzing La Jetee. So I am using Mark Fisher's The Weird and the Eerie, so I am focusing on the Eerie. So what the Eerie is, it's kind of defined by a failure of presence or a failure of absence. So the lack of people in the museum, that is a failure of presence. There's no one else there, and we would kind of associate that with something eerie, or at least the grounds for an eerie feeling to happen because it's out of place. There should be multiple people, quite a few people in a museum. But it's not just the failure of absence or failure of presence that defines the eerie. It's also a question or speculation that occurs. So there's just the question of agency, as in what's involved in organizing this. Is there some certain shared power that has some involvement with the lack of people around, or how they're in the museum? And that's kind of what defines the eerie. There has to be some form of mystique and the unknown. It has to contain the unknown. Once everything becomes known, it's no longer eerie. It's known. So there's not that strange feeling that would occur. So what does the eerie have to do with La Jetee and romance? Basically, the museum that Marker places the two protagonists, the two lovers in, it combines the eerie because there's this failure of presence of other people, but there's also just the scientists themselves who are replacing the protagonist in the museum. They have their aim of how they want to do that. And then there's just this romance shared between them as they're looking at the different animals together. Okay, so the first thing is I just wanted to go through a scene that's right before the museum scene. Actually, can you go to the next slide, just so we can look at it before we talk about it? Slide right after it. And then can you? This slide.
Seems to be blank.
Okay, we don't need that. Let's go to the second plane.
Second plane.
Okay. So we will focus on just the museum itself. The museum is described as containing eternal beasts, which are the taxidermied animals. And they're all different animals contained in one space, I mean, as a museum would do. And the two lovers are just together. And it is, yeah, we get the sense of it here because the man is being controlled by the scientists. But it's such a lovely experience that they share together, with the music playing as well. And yes, there's just this romance combined with this kind of unknown. So this is the museum. And yeah, we see the inclusion of Eerie because it says beginning at a moment. And there's a previous reference in the film to where these images that are welled up through his mind are kind of compared to a museum as they're all together. So this is kind of like an exploration of how these animals and them two exploring the animals together kind of reacts as this relic of memory. One defining part of the museum scene is the woman's acceptance of the narrator's inconsistent appearances and vanishes. It's still eerie because she accepts it. She doesn't know what happened. She can't make anything of it. But it's this love that they share together and this just overwhelming pleasant experience that it doesn't become important. This love that they share outweighs this uncomfortable sense of the unknown. There's some romantic evidence of just them two together. So even just how they look at the animals or how they look at her neck, like they become kind of subjects within the museum. And just looking at them, just so lovely. And they also have the ability, because I mean he's constantly being surveilled by the scientists. In this scene in particular, you can't actually see them. You can't see their faces. You can't see if they're looking at each other because of the backlighting, which kind of adds to this. We don't fully know what's going on, which is somewhat eerie, but is, I don't know, them together is okay. And then once he returns back into other tunnels, we see how the eeriness kind of progresses into a far more uncomfortable setting when she's gone. So he still has this unknown, and he senses that something has changed, which kind of embodies feelings of the eerie because he can't quite place exactly what has changed, but there is something. And it's no longer pleasant because he's not with his lover, and the unknown becomes more focused and more of a threat to him. So yeah, how does this make the eerie and the romantic beyond La Jetee? I feel like when most people think of the eerie, they associate it with horror or haunted house. And of course, that's certainly true. We often experience eeriness in terms of horror, but Chris Marker shows how there is a sort of romantic element that can be incorporated within the eerie, and how this kind of could be a sublime experience. So there's a big versatility of the eerie. It's not just sort of like focused within the horror genre.
All